I have been selling the backlot now for a year and a half, and I always utilize it, I kid you not, as a rite of passage cherries on the wine. Because in a blind setting, people, it validates and humbles the palate. It has been an extremely successful crowd pleaser. So first and foremost, why is it called backlot?
That's surprising to me. That's a crowd pleaser, actually. But back when we planted, we were the first people to plant Mourvedre in Arizona in '97, and nobody knew what it was. A lot of people still don't know what it is, don't know how to pronounce it. So it's just easier. And I blend, usually. So it's just easier to. It's planted in the back of the vineyard, so much easier just to use that prosaic name.
And it is a bit of a GSM with the scotch of Zin.
Yeah, about 10%. It's 10% Zin. But interestingly, done whole cluster because my destemmer wasn't working. So I actually foot trod the Zin in that particular. That was the last vintage of Zinfandel. We grafted it over to Graciano the next year. But a lot of the spicy kick, the length of flavor on that in the backlot is from the stems in the Zinfandel. Even though it's only 10%, it has a disproportionate effect on the spiciness of that wine, peppery character. And
that was mainly imparted by the introduction of the Zin?
Yes, and the stems specifically, yeah.
And that was by accident?
Largely, yeah.
And is that then you
Things
think...
beyond my control, an act of God.
So you think that as a model for this specific blend, the backlot, that you think that at that small capacity, you will continue to do that partial whole cluster ferment?
Yeah, well, the 2010 backlot, when it comes out, it's entirely, in this case, entirely from what used to be Dick's Vineyard, is now Todd bought it from, since we got wiped out by hail, but we actually a lot of stems in the 2010 version, but they don't come across quite as pungently. Fun wine, actually. 2010 is different, and Grenache, Syrah, and Tempranillo in this case, but stems used in both the Syrah and the Grenache.
Okay.
Quite a bit. So we're looking at probably 40% stem usage, stem inclusion in the 2010.
So do you think, is that going to make for a more...
It actually comes across as a smoother wine to me.
Is that the addition of tannins to tannins?
It's a different place. Sonoyta fruit is, 2/3 of the backlot is from our vineyard. The Zinfandel and the Mourvedre are entirely from our vineyard. Half of the Syrah is from our vineyard as well. The remaining Syrah and Grenache are from Rod Keeling's place. So it's about 1/3 from Rod's place, Keeling Schaefer vineyard, and 2/3 from ours. And the stuff from Sonoyta definitely tends to be more tannic, more structured, just naturally.
So,
and all of Dick's fruit is, again, or Todd's now is from Kansas Settlement. So you're talking about quite a different place.
And
lower in tannin, usually.
A little more accessible, you think?
Yeah, very much so.
And
yeah.
You said that it wasn't intentional for you to destem. Do you typically, or not destem, do you typically destem everything?
I would have destemmed the Zin. Zinfandel is one thing that, generally speaking, you do want to destem. Ours was incredibly tannic, usually, just with no stems. But in this case, it worked quite well because it's only 10% of the blend, so it's very, the inclusion percentage is quite small. And I had no choice, so.
How long have you been making backlot?
Well, that's funny. I was just looking at my old label approval. Actually, the first backlot, the backlot used to be an experimental block. So we had weird stuff like Claret, the white from the south. That was part of the first. Dale Sparks at Quench actually reviewed that wine. 90 was unfiltered. 94 backlot. It was, what was it? Believe it or not, Pinot Gris, Claret, Marzon, I believe, and Semillon, unfiltered. But that was the first backlot. Second backlot was when the Mourvedre started, when I actually planted Mourvedre. That was 98. But we've been making it as Mourvedre-based blend since 99, off and on.
And is there, in terms of what you selected for the Mourvedre, is there a difference in terms of the clones, whether it's Mourvedre, Tannat, or Monastrell, in terms of how you color, or is it still the same grapevine and the same clone?
Two different plantings. In 97, we planted the California Mataro selection that's been around forever. Probably came from Klein.
Which Rich uses a lot of Mataro.
Yeah,
they use
Bridgehead, but I think they buy it from those guys. It's Contra Costa County, and most it used to be way back in the day. We used to have it in our restaurant list back in the early 90s, but that I think originally came from Contra Costa County, which is where all this Klein-controlled Mourvedre vineyards were, where Bonnie and stuff came from. But the second planting of Mourvedre, we have 3 acres now. About 2 acres is the Mataro clone. We have an acre of Tablas Creek selection. and they're quite different. And 09, the Mourvedre that you have had on the list, that was actually entirely, that was a Talbot's Creek clone, 13A. The stuff from the Mataro was actually deeper and richer in the same vintage and ended up going into Claire's, which is 16.2. So you have completely different styles of wine in the same vintage for no apparent reason other than plant material. So.
Wow.